We're going to continue looking at graphs, particularly story graphs, in lesson 33. And that means we're going to start by making sure we have not only the understanding of the problem, but for a graph we can annotate the different intervals, just like we did in the last lesson. And then we can create our own graphs and identify the various intervals and what that should look like. So we're just applying what we can do in the context of the problem. So let's look at this first one, and we're going to annotate carefully. The graph below shows Craig's trips to visit his friends in another state. In the course of his travels, he encountered both highway and city driving. Okay, so he has highway and city driving, and this is his trip to his friend's house in another state. Based on the graph, during which interval did Craig most likely drive in the city? Explain your reasoning. Explain what might have happened between intervals B and C. Okay, so let's just think about this for a second. We know that he has highway driving and city driving. So I want to think for a minute, when we're driving in the highway versus the city, what's the difference? Just think about context for a second. What's different about riding on the highway versus the city? Well, being that I live in New York City, or I used to, I know there was tons of traffic in the city. So city driving is actually slower. And when I grew up in the Bronx, it was, I think, 30 miles an hour in the Grand Concourse. That was the fastest you can go. Any higher, you get a ticket. Versus the highway, you can go very fast. I think on the highway in New York City, you can go 55 miles an hour. In some areas of the country, you could even go way faster than that. So highway tends to be faster, unless there's traffic, than going in the city. All right, so let's look at the intervals we have, and I'm going to break this up again, just so we can see from A to B. From B to C. D and E. Okay, so we have 5 different sections of the story. So let's tell a story and think about the plot of the story. What's happening in the first part of the story? Well, he's driving, and let's see, we're talking about hours and miles traveled. Wow. So in the first part of the story, for the first 2 hours, he's driving a lot, and he actually gets to go 110 miles. Wow. So it looks like he's going pretty fast to drive 110 miles in 2 hours. But then in the second part of the story, between B and C, between hours 2 and 3.5, so about 90 minutes, the amount of miles traveled doesn't change at all. So he doesn't get any further. It just stays at 0. There's no increase at all. Then from 3.5 hours to 5 hours, it increases again. And he makes it all the way to 200 miles. I'm actually going to put that in there, and I'm going to put point B in there too. And then, so he's going pretty fast in that part. And he goes another, let's see, from 200 to 230. So at 7 hours, he's gone 230 miles. So he's still increasing, but he's not going as fast as he did. So if this was the story, he's going pretty fast and no change, he's just stopped. And then he goes fast again, and then he starts to, he's still going, but he's not going at the same speed, it looks like in the story. So that's what I'm kind of imagining. All right, so when did he most likely drive in the city? Well, my guess is he was driving in the city here during this part. And my guess would be, here he would be on the highway. Here he wasn't going anywhere at all, so maybe he got out of his car. And he's on the highway again, because he's going pretty fast. And then here is when he got to the city. That would be my guess. So let's put that into words. Craig most likely drove in the city between intervals D and E. His speed the rate of miles driven over time, comma, was lower than during hours 0 to 2 and 3.5 to 5. I believe he drove on the highway during those time intervals, but between hour 5, let's make sure it's clear. I really want that 5 to look like a 5. 5 and 7, he drove in the city. Boom. There you go. So I have it in there. Matter of fact, I'll even go further. Here's 5x7. So we have it in there. So reading over again, Craig most likely drove in the city between intervals D and E. His speed, the rate of miles driven over time, was lower than during hours 0 to 2 and 3.5 to 5. I believe he drove on the highway during those time intervals, but between hours 5, let's put an S there, hours 5 and 7, he drove in the city. And I have 5 is less than X is less than 7. So hit pause and let's jot this down into your notes. All right, let's look at the next part, and I want you to get your creative thinking juices. Explain what might have happened between intervals B and C. So again, we're just looking at these that part where there was 0 change here to here. What could have happened where he had 0 change in miles, where he didn't drive or increase the number of miles? His distance did not change. So I want you to just hit pause and just think, list 2 or 3 things that could have actually happened where he would have 0 change. All right, so some ideas could have included he stopped driving. That's more than likely what happened. Why would he stop driving though? So here's some ideas. To rest, to eat lunch, he saw something he wanted to do. Like I drive by a place and like, oh my God, that store looks really cool. So I stop if I want to shop at something or if I see something that looks fun. So I'm going to put like shop. Or he visited a friend in the area. And of course you would put this into a full sentence, but here are just possible things because we definitely know he stopped driving. And is it possible that he was just in traffic for 2 hours? Yes, possible there was traffic, but to not move at all in 2 hours would be highly unlikely. So he stopped driving, and these are possible reasons why he stopped driving. Well, that's it for this lesson, Math Marbles. We've done a lot to show that we understand what the problem means. You can see how we're annotating and using our vertical lines to section off the graph and tell the story, like what could happen when things are increasing and decreasing in the story. And we can create our own graph. That's going to be something that you'll practice more of over the next few days, and being able to identify the intervals in the story. All right, that's it for today's lesson, Math Marvel. I'll see you in the next one. Be well.